The entire world is in turmoil after the recent election. It looks like, in fact, the numerical data says there is election fraud. The numbers coming up and how it happened next.
I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
All while ferreting out the bottom line.
On all topics, controversial, bizarre, and taboo. Interviewing movers and shakers, agitators and muckrakers.
But that doesn't answer my question. That is all I'm answering.
With me, Gary Harrison, as your guide.
Harrison with you, streamcasting and broadcasting on FMs up and down the east and west coast of the United States. The election has happened. It's now a distant memory to some. It's a bloated memory to others. It certainly hasn't gone away, and where it will go, well, that is yet to be determined. But how did it turn out the way it did as all of us watched the blue bing, 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 and then whoosh, a red paint from coast to coast? Well, Greg Palast is with us, famously BBC's Greg Palast, brought in specifically by Rolling Stone magazine to cover the 2016 elections. And what he has been doing for the last 15 years is covering real fraud. And let me tell you, the numbers are adding up to something unbelievable to most of us.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that is that Trump wasn't elected. They had to steal it. I mean, this is like Bush in 2000 and Bush 2004. I've been on this beat too long. I can't believe I'm back on it for Rolling Stone. And, in 2000, I uncovered how W became president because because Katherine Harris and Jeb Bush, W's brother, eliminated tens of thousands of black guys from the voter rolls, calling them felons, and their only crime was voting while black. That was how he ended up with
the
W.
BWB.
Right. So,
yes.
Yeah, exactly. So then, and we had more shenanigans in 2004. They couldn't beat it in 2008. But now there's trickery going on here that no one in the lamestream is covering. Thank you for bringing me in, and thank Rolling Stone for bringing me back home from Britain, because I usually have, I do a report for the mainstream, but it's just the mainstream of the world called BBC and The Guardian. But now I'm back home and up close where I can smell the fraud. Yes, 60 million people marched to the polls and said, Donald, save us. That we can't deny. That stain will not wash away. But what is true is that more people, and not just the popular vote, but in those swing states that supposedly gave the Donald his 270 electoral votes, not so. It's a big fib.
One of the things we're looking at, and let's take a look at California. We are, almost 38 million people, bigger than Canada now.
Too bad.
Yeah, right, a third of the size of Europe. And here, we, in our primary elections, lost 2.5 million votes?
We're never counted.
Never counted. And the point of my bringing that up is we had, just within recent memory, this massive volume of votes disappeared.
Right. I used to teach statistics at Indiana University, of all things. And I can tell you right now, there aren't enough white guys to elect Donald Trump or Republican Congress in a presidential year. Can't happen.
Right.
So you have to get rid of the unwhite guys.
Reduce the non-whites. And this started, interestingly enough, in 2013.
Yes.
According to your film and according to your BBC research, according to your Rolling Stone article, back in 2013, Trump and his cronies were purchasing, shall we say, funding, fueling, backing a big organization called Crosscheck.
Here's how it really works. It's about removing the non-white voters from the voter rolls before they even have a chance to vote. That's the main cause of fixed elections.
So we saw in North Carolina this time, like over 6,000 people of color, poof, gone.
Yeah, that's called caging. It's against the law. I know, in fact, in my film, I have the guy who did it. He confesses to me on camera. This is the guy. His name is Colonel Jay DeLance. Everyone in the South is a colonel. White, if they're white.
Well, yes.
So the colonel,
like Colonel Sanders,
right. Except this guy is not deep fried; he's for real. And the thing is, he would send out caging is when you send out thousands of letters to black folk, and you write "do not forward." When the letters come back because they're not delivered for whatever reason, often urban, people have moved within a town or whatever. They're still legal voters, but they say these are illegal ghost voters. They don't exist, and they challenge their vote. 2013 is important too, because that is the year that the U.S. Supreme Court cut the heart out of the Voting Rights Act. That was the 1965 act that Martin Luther King won, which said black people and any voter of color has a right to vote as much as a white person. It took till 1965. Then, in 13, by one vote, by a Republican, the 5 Republicans voted together to eliminate much of that law. And that was the open gun, so that this thing, cross-check, then was allowed to thrive.
And I'm just going to jump in for a second, because it was that incident, that same Supreme Court, that also overturned Proposition 8. And I remember here in West Hollywood, we're in Hollywood right now, 10,000 people showed up to celebrate the fact that they could get married, gay marriage. But at the same time, black people couldn't vote by the tune of maybe some 10 million. So I was asking, would you swap your wedding dress so a black person could vote? But nobody was prepared to actually wrap their head around, we get to do this, but all of these people are now vanished.
The Democratic Party, where one would reliably predict that most gay people might vote Democratic, one might reliably predict that most people of color might vote Democratic. You've created a civil war within that party before the candidate for president, let's just call it Hillary Clinton, has announced. This is a very, speaking of cynical, what a beautiful political plan, if that were a plan.
Well, I hadn't thought about that, but divide and conquer is the tried and true tool of the elite, and I do believe that we've found sort of an odd canceling out, haven't we? These two forces within the Democratic Party have sort of mitigated each other on back-to-back days, while simultaneously providing an incentive, frankly, to do violence to a certain extent. Now, of course, I'm completely opposed to that. But it's really troubling.
Well, here's the problem, is that once you eliminate the black vote, once you eliminate student votes and progressive votes, everything goes now. We're going to have a 20-year reversal. So what happened with this cross-check business, once the Voting Rights Act was out of the way, this guy, Chris Kobach, who's now on the transition team, likely Homeland Security chief.
Transitioning into a male or a female?
He's transitioning.
One never knows nowadays.
Into one of Donald Duckling. These are criminals. You vote twice, you go to the can for 5 years. So when I asked the Republican state voting officials to give me those lists, who are these terrible people voting twice, they wouldn't give it to me. But I got them anyway, because I see the hat, I'm an investigative reporter. And actually, now they should arrest them because of felony crime, but they don't. Why? Because who's on the list? People like James Brown, David Lee, Jorge Rodriguez. You say, well, that's just common names, not for Republicans.
Right.
And so what happens is that, so for example, they have 288 guys named James Brown in Georgia. And they say those 288 guys voted in another state. How do they know that? Because they found guys named James Brown. Now they said,
not hard to do.
James Brown Jr. is supposed to be the same voter as James Brown Sr. So they just take away their votes. And now here's the trick. They don't even tell you you've been removed from the voter rolls because you supposedly voted in another state. They don't tell you. Your name's either missing, poof, or they mark an I next to your name, which means inactive. People didn't know what that means. They go, inactive? I've been voting at this place for 10 years. I've never been. What do you mean I'm inactive? The number of people who lost their vote by cross-check, they're overwhelmingly minority, and it swamped his win in Michigan. Same thing in Arizona. Supposedly, the Donald won Arizona by 85,000 votes. This is a state with a massive minority population.
North Carolina. 177,000, and the cross-check purged over 500,000, 589,393. And just to reset, cross-check is a company that Donald Trump, since 2013, and others have been running money through. A lot of these GOP guys.
These rich guys. It's run by this guy, Chris Kobach, who is the guy that wrote the Driving While Brown Law, SB 1070. This is the guy that told...
Famously in Arizona.
Yeah, this is the guy who told Donald Trump to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. And by the way, he's going to be in charge of immigration now under the president. But in order to get to that job, he had to steal enough votes to make the Donald president.
Thank you so much, Greg, for coming on today. Thank you for bringing forth the light, for revealing these extraordinary monkey shines. the grimness. You can go online, you can find the best democracy money can buy. You can Google it, and gregpalast.com, gregpalast.com is probably the best go-to place to find everything you need to know about this right now. So thank you, my friend.
Okay. Happy inauguration.
Harrison with you, streamcasting and broadcasting on FMs up and down the east and west coast of the United States. The election has happened. It's now a distant memory to some. It's a bloated memory to others. It certainly hasn't gone away.
Unraveling urban legends and grappling with worldwide top secret issues. I've even racked up some of their awards. All while ferreting out the bottom line. On all topics, controversial, bizarre, and taboo. Interviewing movers and shakers, agitators and muckrakers.
But that doesn't answer my question. That is all I'm answering.
With me, Gary Harrison, as your guide.
Is in turmoil after the recent election. It looks like, in fact, the numerical data says there is election fraud. The numbers coming up and how it happened next.
I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theory.
The entire world